My name is Martha Peet. Peet is my married name, and I'm an Inuk. My birth name was Kitkanatjak, which was my grandmother's name. We're always named, we have a naming system. We're always named by after our grandparents or using if a person is a very good hunter, good runner, good worker, those are the kind of names that we were always named after. So we have our very own naming system, which is Inuktitut naming system. And I was born in 1950. I'm 70 years old, and I was given a birth name, Tutkanatjak, which was my grandmother's name. And then the missionaries came in about 1955 when the Anglican ministers came into the community. They told us we had to have a biblical name. And my dad chose the name Martha for me. So for many years, I was known as Martha Kitkanatjak. We never had family names. Family names, which means like the Southern way, having a family name. That was established in the late 1960s, and it was the government of Canada that said we had to have a family name. But I was old enough that I didn't have to change my name, a family name. And so for a long time, I was Martha Tutkanatjak. And Tutkanatjak does not have a meaning, but it was my grandmother's name. And so I didn't have to change my name. My younger sister, who's 10 years younger than me, she had to change her name to my mom's last name because my dad had passed away already. So but I was old enough that I didn't have to change my name. And so that's the naming system that we use in the North. And all I knew from the time I was born till I was about 10 years old, all I spoke was in Inuktitut. There was no school. The school was built in 1960. That was the Federal Day School. And so I started school when I was 10 years old. My mom did not want to send me to a residential school. My sister was sent to a residential school in about 1952, and she never returned home until 1982. So my mom didn't see her for 30 years after she was sent to residential school. So my mom made sure I was not going to be sent to residential school. So I didn't start school till I was 10 years old. So when this first school was built in Taloyoak, I was 10, and there was about 18 maybe more like 15 students in that classroom, and we were all aged, everybody aged from 6 years old to about 18, 19 years old. We were all in the same room. And we were all in, regardless our age, we were all in kindergarten. And then we started grade 1 the following year. And there was only one teacher, and she taught in Taloyoak, my home community, for about 6 or 7 years. And so she started teaching us in English. We did go to school before 1960, but it was the Anglican minister that taught us at the Anglican minister's home, at his house. But we were learning syllabics. We were not taught in any English at all. He spoke Inuktitut from being in the other communities. He had learned the Inuktitut language, so he taught everything to us from the Bible, and taught us how to write syllabics. So the school for me in English didn't start till I was 10 years old. And Taloyoak was named Spence Bay. Originally it was Spence Bay, and some guy, a sailor, had arrived there, and his last name was Spence, Captain Spence, I would think. And so they named the community Spence Bay. But before that, it was always known as Taloyoak. And the community names, they started changing the names back to original names that they were, instead of being named after some captain from England or something. So the community, my home community, and plus so many other communities in Nunavut, all changed back to the original names. And Taloyoak, Taloyoak, Taloyoak means shield, when it's something you can hide behind. And Yuak means big. So shield, big. And where that name came from is Taloyoak is there was a caribou path that caribou traveled through every summer, their feeding grounds during their migration. And this one, their path, caribou path, they used that same path for many, many, many years. So what the Inuit did before we had guns, rifles, they used harpoons to catch their caribou, and that was not easy. So what they did was they piled rocks on each side of the caribou path. They piled them high enough that they can hide behind the rocks that they built. And as the caribou go by on that, in between those pile of rocks, there was pile of rocks on this side and pile of rocks on that side. So the Inuit, the hunters, can hide behind those rocks. So that is a shield that they use, they hid behind. And they would use harpoons to kill the caribou, because caribou is so important, like a part of our life back then, and so much so today. So Taloyoak means shield, big, and that was a big shield that Inuit built in between. The caribou path was in between all those piles of rocks. So that's where the name came from. And so nobody paid attention to those shields for many, many, many years. And then they started to preserve them. So today, right today, nobody touches those rocks, pile of rocks. They now have lichen on them. And rocks, when they are exposed to the air for many, many years, the lichen grows on them. So lichen is on them. And so it's very, very well preserved today. So that's my home community. And so many communities in Nunavut are the same. The Baffin, there's in Nunavut, there's Baffin Island to the east. Baffin Island, they have Inuit communities, part of northern Baffin, right down to southern Baffin. And they all have different, they have one language, but they all have different dialects. So even in Baffin Island itself, when Inuit first started mixing years ago, they had a hard time understanding one another, because there was hardly any travel them days. Years ago, it was hard to get, there were no planes. So everybody was established in where they were born and raised. So, but nowadays, dialects are all mixed, especially when you go to the capital of Nunavut, which is Iqaluit. Iqaluit means lots of fish. So Iqaluit, the capital of Nunavut, it's all mixed. The dialects are all mixed. They have their very own language now, which established after people started moving into Iqaluit, and now they have their very own dialect in that it's called city. It's called city now, but it used to be town of Iqaluit. Since it became the capital, it became a city. So they have their very own dialect, and but in legislative assembly in Iqaluit, they have different interpreters from different communities, because some people from other places, other districts, like the region where I come from, which is in the middle, and then Kivalliq region, more to the west. Legislative Assembly has different interpreters with different dialects, because the language has become so important that they wanted interpreters in their own dialect wherever they're voted from. So there's lots of dialects. My dialect is called Natsilik dialect. Um, people, which translates to Natsilik means people from of the seal. Um, so that my dialect is Natsilik mute. So my dialect is very, very guttural, whereas if you go to Baffin Island to the west, to the east, they speak very softly from their mouth, front of their mouth, and it's easy dialect to learn. And my dialect, Natsilik mute, from the middle of Nunavut, Kitilmute. Kitilmute means people from the middle. So my dialect is not that easy to learn because it's very guttural. When I started, because I have lived in so many places in Nunavut region, in Kivalliq region, Kitilmute region, where I was born and raised, and then I lived in Baffin Island, that I've adopted whatever language is used, mainly in Iqaluit, because that's what they are, when they're translating in on paper, it's the Legislative Assembly, mainly dialect that they use, which is used for translating everything nowadays. And so it's really important for the Inuit to keep their languages, their language and their dialects have been getting more focus so that we can all keep our dialects, our original dialects, because it's only one language, but there's so many different dialects. But there are a few words that are different. When you say thank you in my dialect, it would be Kuyanakotit. If you go to Kuwait, Kivalliq region, it would be Matna. If you go to Baffin Island, it's Kuyanamik, which is very, it's said in the very front of the mouth, Kuyanamik. Whereas I would say thank you in my dialect is Kuyanakutit, which is very guttural. And so there's some words that are different, but very few. And the language is a big part of the education curriculum up north. There's certain hours of the day that there's only Inuktitut language that are taught in the classrooms. They are forced to learn Inuktitut. There's no English spoken at all. They're not going to embarrass the children if they don't know how to say a word. So they allow the children to ask in a question in English. But otherwise, if they can understand, only Inuktitut language is used in that classroom. So they are allowed to ask questions if they don't know the words in Inuktitut, or if they can't say a sentence in Inuktitut, they are allowed to ask in English so the teacher can understand, because they don't want them to be shy about talking in classroom. So, but otherwise, just Inuktitut is spoken in those classrooms. And in terms of languages go, the Baffin Island children are very fluent in speaking Inuktitut. They're comfortable talking to their parents in Inuktitut. When they're playing with their friends, they speak in Inuktitut. But if you go to my region, Kittlemute region, English is used more, but there has been a push to have more Inuktitut speaking among the children and everybody, because there's still a lot of people that don't understand English. Pretty well anybody older than me, they don't really speak English, because I was born right at that change when Inuit were moving into communities, and for example, the store manager, the RCMP, government administrator, they were starting to move into those communities. So in my home community, I was born right at when the Southerners were starting to move into the communities. So I got exposed to English, but my older sister Mary, who is in her 80s, she spent many, many years in the hospital. So she does speak some English, but she was in the hospital down south for many, many, many years. So she's pretty comfortable in speaking in English. And so that's the language. But as children, my grandparents, I don't remember my grandfather very much, but I do remember my grandmother very well, because I used to, when I got scared of my mother, I used to run to her igloo, her snow house. And then I would stay with her until my mom has settled down about something that she thought I shouldn't have done or whatever. And my mother and my grandmother only spoke in Inuktitut. They didn't know any English at all, not one word. So when I started school, there was some Southerners that wanted to ask my parents some questions, and I was the one that was translating between my mother and the Southerners that want to know something. So that my translation it goes way back to when I was very, very young, and being taught the syllabics and Anglican missionaries. So I was one of the first people that really learned how to write in syllabics. And at this point, from what I've been talking about, did anybody have any questions about what I've talked about so far before I go on to something else?
I don't have any questions, but did you want to share pictures soon?
Yes.
Or you want me to share the pictures? So
yeah, we can share the pictures now, and I will talk about the pictures.
Yeah, so just to let people know, Martha had shared some pictures, and then Shris had also found some stuff online that are really interesting. And Martha can talk a little bit about that. Just gonna find it here. Here we go.
Okay, this is a picture that was taken in Kivalliq region.
Mhm.
As you know, Kivalliq is Winnipeg is the gateway for the people coming down south or heading up to Rankin Inlet or anywhere in Keewatin region. So Winnipeg is a gateway to go to Kivalliq region. And this picture, this particular picture is of a woman and a child. This picture was, there was a starvation. There was no caribou, there was no food for some years. And a lot of Inuit people starved. A lot of them starved to death. It's the starvation happened in Baker Lake and also in Alviat. And so a lot of people in Baker Lake area and Alviat went through starvation because there was no food at all. There was no animals, which Inuit depended on for many, many, many years. And there was no stores. So this particular picture was taken during starvation. And as a child, I wore exactly the same clothes as this child is wearing, all caribou clothing. And the lady has caribou clothing. So caribou was so important in days, not only for food, but also for clothing. The mitts, the parkas, the pants, the boots, the inside liners of caribou skin boots, they were all made of caribou skins. And they used, when there was no stores at all whatsoever, they used the muscle from behind the caribou, the sinew that runs along the outside of the tenderloin of the caribou part. They take that muscle and they scrape all the meat off and the fat and they dry it. And that's what they use for thread, which we call sinew. And that was what they used for sewing all these clothings. That's the only thread they had was the caribou sinew. And we can go to the next one. And this picture is taken in an igloo. The floor part of an igloo is shoveled out. Inuit had made homemade shovels, and they had a big knife called pana, P-A-N-A, pana. And they would take all the snow out with the snow knife and shovel, Inuit made shovel, and they would take all the snow off right to the ice. So the ice part, half of the igloo, the floor part was shoveled clean right to the ice. And then the other half, the snow is not removed, and that's what they use for bed. So the man is sitting on the snow, the bed part of a snow house. And of course, the lady is there. So this picture would have been taken probably in the 1950s, early 1950s, because they started having Hudsons Bay stores, and she has a hand crank sewing machine that she is sewing with. So and he's also got probably a homemade soapstone type little cigarette holder. And of course, he's smoking, so there would have been a store already. And you can see some store-bought stuff, like that's Fort Garry tea right behind the lady. So the Hudson's Bay store would have been built already when this picture was taken. Okay, Anna. And this picture was also taken before the stores. Inuit used to make their tobacco pipes out of soapstone. So the longer part, the end of it where it holds the tobacco, that's made from soapstone. And the other half, they would find them days very precious, a piece of wood that might have been drifted from a boat that came in, the supplies for the store when the ships came in. It would have been made of wood. And as you can see, the lady is wearing she has something over herself that's a tartan. And so that would have been after the stores were established in Kivalliq region. And this picture was also taken during the starvation period in the 1950s.
Next one here.
And this lady is packing a parka. You're probably understanding now how important, really important caribou skin was for the Inuit. She's wearing a caribou skin packing parka. And that would have been sewn with the caribou sinew thread. And she is probably in igloo. Even when there's no seal oil lamp to keep the igloo warm, it gets really cold inside the igloo. Even her face, her hair, you can see is frosted with snow. That happens when there's no seal oil lamp burning. Even in igloo, that happens. But I can see the little child is wearing a little hat that would have been material brought in by Hudson's Bay Company to sell in the store. So that little baby is wearing something made out of material that came from the south.
Mm.
So, but
do you want to move to the next one? Or
yes.
Okay. I know you have some really amazing stories, and I do want to get to all of the pictures.
Yeah. And this lady her name is Inuk. I grew up with her. She's the same age as I am. And she's wearing all caribou skin clothing. And her little hair. Actually, my son is married to her daughter.
Wow.
So, and her hair, that little thing on her hair,
Mhm.
it would be tied not with elastic, but with caribou sinew.
Mm.
And of course, that was our big thing as kids. We had no toys, we had no dolls, we had nothing. So the puppies were always our pretend babies. We packed them everywhere.
Cute.
And I remember when I used to pack my puppy in my back and my parka, caribou skin parka, and my mom used to say, "Does your puppy ever need to pee or poop?" So, and she would often say that if you don't give the puppy back to its mother, it's going to be dead because the puppy will starve. So you have to remember to give the puppy back to the mother once in a while and make sure you take them out, put them on the land so they can pee and poop.
Yep.
And so that was our way of playing house and playing parents. But as you can see, Nunavut is wearing all caribou skin clothing, and her daughter, my daughter-in-law, looks just like her mother.
Mm.
So I don't know if you remember Martin Hartwell, the plane crash in about 1972, where he had a small plane and he was taking some patients from Taloyoak to Yellowknife for medical attention. So there was two patients, and the other patient was this lady. And so she passed away in that plane crash, Martin Hartwell plane crash in 1972.
Mm.
My daughter-in-law survived because my daughter-in-law was left at home while her mother was going to Yellowknife or Edmonton for medical attention. So my daughter-in-law was raised by different members of the family. So this is Eunice Inuk, was her name. Did anybody have any questions about that little girl?
Oh, I just like the thought of like learning responsibility, having to
Yeah,
learn a responsibility and to take care of think about feeding and think about,
yeah, because
making sure that they're able to do their business. And, it's good, probably better preparation for parenting than a doll.
Yeah.
yes, that's the way we were,
Hmm.
We had no dolls, we had no toys. We used to make pretend houses by piling up rocks in a circle, and that was our pretend in the summertime, our pretend house. And we would collect tin cans, old tin cans, to pretend that they were pots or kettle.
Oh.
Um, so those kind of things were our toys when we were growing up.
Hmm.
Yeah, okay, we can go on to the next one. And this guy is at the entrance of an igloo. Um, in the winter time, the snow houses um, were built, put together by going right onto the ice surface. So they take all the snow off from the top. So you kind of, to enter the igloo, you're up there
Mhm.
and then walk down, and then this is an entrance. We used to call it a porch.
Mhm.
It's a little tiny igloo part, and then as you go in, there's a big igloo where the people are living. But a lot of times, um, to prevent the loose dogs from eating the meat, if we leave it outside, they will put it in the porch.
Mm.
Like things like seal meat, um, fish, things like that were stored in the porch, which is where this person is. And you can see that he is dressed very traditional,
Mhm.
all skin clothing. And so this is a porch of an igloo.
Want to go on to the next one?
Yeah. And this is still, this lady is entering into the porch before going into the snow house. But a lot of times you can see that dark spot up on top of the picture. That would be a skin
Mhm.
draped over the sides of the snow. And so this is an entrance to an igloo, and she's dressed very traditional, all skin clothing, caribou skins, mostly all caribou skin.
Mhm.
So we can go on to the next one. And this lady is sleeping, as you can see. It's all very traditional, all caribou skin clothing. You could probably see a little bit of beadwork in front of that picture, just below.
Mhm.
That's when the Hudsons Bay Company started bringing in beads. Beading was prominent mainly around Kivalliq region, because Kivalliq region is closer to the south. So there would have been a lot of um, things like the beads the people from Kuwait got way before we get it,
Mhm.
because of the distance.
Mhm.
So they started bringing in luxury things like the beads because it's further down south. And we never got them for years because they only really brought essential stuff like tea and sugar and flour and baking powder and lard. um, so this lady um, is sleeping in caribou skin bedding, and the child is still up. But this is very traditional picture of a
Mhm.
mother and a child. Okay, next one. And this guy in the springtime, this picture would have been taken in about June when we all had dog teams. This guy's name is Philip Napachi. He's from my home community. And there had already been exposure of the southern stuff. So he's wearing store-bought cloth pants and a jacket and a toque. So this would have been in more modern days, and you can see there's some metal and wood on the sled. Before there was wood and metal in the communities up north, they would use a seal skin to put everything in, and then dogs pull them. but this is more modern because there's already metal and there's wood. And the dogs, husky dogs, are on their harnesses. Philip is letting the dogs cross. And then after all the dogs get to the other side of the big crack, you can't see the bottom. It is so deep. And when all the dogs are all on the other side, he would say words that dogs understand. They're, things like mush, but in Inuktitut, the husky dogs understand some commands.
Mhm.
And after they're all across, he would ask them to start going, and the sled would be the last thing to go over the crack on the ice while Philip Nabachi is sitting on the sled. And I did a lot of traveling with my mom and dad. There were very, very many days that my dad would go alone and we stayed at home in an igloo, wait for him to come back. But there were also time to take the family out on a dog team, to go camping, to go fishing. But those are the times that were really scary for me because I just dread going over the cracks on the sled. And those experiences stay with me right today, those fears. And my mother, when we're on a lake and we're fishing in the holes, my mother was always saying, don't go anywhere, but stay behind me all the time.
Mm.
And she would say, you're going to fall in the water if you walk around. This was only in the springtime and early fall when the ice is thin. So right today, I have fears of being on the spring ice and those cracks. And there were times that one of my biggest fears as a youngster was when the ice is starting to melt, it used to start disappearing around towards the end of June. And we would have to use ice floes to get from the land to the ice. And then when we're finished fishing, from the ice back to the land. That was my biggest fear, being on a small ice floe, and my dad would go back and forth on those ice floes to take us back and forth. And that was, to me, that is very, very scary today.
Yeah, it sounds really scary. I'd be scared too.
It reminds me of just being young in the springtime when there's thunderstorms. We thought it was exciting, but we were really cautioned heavily against it to be made scared. But I think it's just so we would have respect for like the power of the springtime and what could happen to us.
Yes.
Yeah. To keep us safe.
Yeah. Thunder is another thing, but the fear of thunder didn't stay with me. But my mother, oh my gosh, even an igloo, she used to turn off anything burning, like the Colexio oil lamp. And she used to tell me it's going to attract the thunder, lightning. And so I had that fear when I was younger, but I got over it over the years. Okay, so that's Philip Napatsuk with his modern clothing, but he's still got seal skin boots.
Hmm.
Mhm.
So this, he would have been very modern them days to be wearing that kind of clothing. Okay, next one. And this guy is doing drum dancing. We don't drum dance outside, but for the picture, I would think Mr. Harrington asked him to drum dance, but all the drum dancing that we did, or our parents, the women sang songs, traditional songs, while the men did the drum dancing. So, but my dad was a drummer. He drum danced, and that I often listen to women singing traditional songs and listen to the sounds the drummers make when they're dancing, when they're drumming. And that takes me, that has a special meaning to me
Mm-hmm.
and always will. And so this guy's wearing sealskin boots. He's got a cloth pants, and he's got a caribou skin parka with a wolverine fur around the hood. So you can tell by his mouth that he is making sounds as he is drumming.
Yeah.
Okay, next one. This one is picture of Inuit before Hudsons Bay Company started selling tents. The Inuit had tents that were made of caribou skin. They dry the skins, clean them up, soften them, and sew them together to make tents. So this would have been further down south, this picture, because you can see a lot of modern stuff like pots and pans and so this would have been further south because they have lots of wood. So they could go somewhere and probably get some wood. So I wanted you to see how the tents are made from skins way back when, before we got cloth tents. So we can go on to the next one.
We have a couple
That's
minutes
beautiful.
left, Martha. I just wanted to skip a couple pictures here. And I know you have some amazing stories about your family too.
Yeah,
So I
this
just want to,
picture is of my uncle. He's ice fishing. The Char go through the ice, go through the water, and he sees them running and then spears them. So that's all the Char he caught. We can go to the next one.
Mhm.
And this is Trollic. I knew him very well. He has got all the fox skins to sell at the Hudsons Bay Company. Okay, next one.
Hmm.
And this is Bella. She's alive today. And Betty Brewster, who the baby was awarded by Governor General a few years ago with an award, lifetime achievement in interpreting, translating. She's retired now, retired interpreter translator. And that's her older sister, Bella. Okay, next
When
one.
you graduate, I guess you have younger siblings you can pack.
Yeah. And this lady here is doing string games. That would be, I think, a caribou that she just put together. And this is very old picture. They're in their skin clothing.
Mhm.
Go to the next one. And all the foxes, these foxes are not caught by one person, but they're Hudsons Bay Company. They're already owned by Hudsons Bay Company. Getting them, airing them out to pack them in boxes to send down south. Okay. And this is my cousin, Kutruk. He's going to spear a fish, or hoping to spear a fish. So before we had rods or hooks or anything, that's how we caught our fish.
It's a lot of skill.
Yes. And this lady is in labor. Inuit women used to deliver their babies sitting like she is, with her arms like that, and the lady to assist her would be behind her. And so this is how Inuit used to deliver their babies. Okay. And this is my dad. He's really, really smiling because a photographer wanted to take a picture of my dad spearing a char fish. But the photographer got tired of waiting for my dad to catch a fish. So he asked my dad to spear the dead fish again so he can take a picture. And my dad thought that was so funny. So he's really smiling.
He obviously has more patience than the photographer, because look at how much fish he caught.
That would be all day.
Yeah.
Catch, yeah.
Yeah. Wow. And then next one.
This is my grandmother. She was also joking. These are the first that she would bring to the Hudsons Bay Company to sell. And she had put the foxes around her shoulders, one on her head. And she was telling the photographer, this is how the Queen of England is going to be wearing these furs. So my grandmother is really, really laughing.
Oh.
And yeah, you were saying that they don't wear furs like that.
Oh no, this is totally out of our way. She was just saying the Queen of England will be wearing these furs around her like this.
Oh, I think your family has a really good sense of humor too.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh yes, my grandmother did. So did my mother.
yeah.
I think we have some photos of your home at
This is my
Taloyoak.
very modern home community of Taloyoak. So these are all the buildings that most of them belong to the government. This is the center. This is the downtown part where the blue houses are in the middle there. The RCMP houses, the government garage, the craft store, and so the paths like that, they never existed, but nowadays they do that for four-wheel Hondas and that. Okay, we can go to the next one. And this is also a road. This is the Hudsons Bay Company area. Everything they build was always red and white. So anything, when you go to the communities, anything red and white was Hudsons Bay Company owned. Yeah, next one. This is also another picture. At that little point that goes out. That's the RC church and the manse. And of course, you know, government staff housing, government houses, government garage in the blue there. Uh, this picture is so modern, I don't even know what that building is right up on top of the picture. That big building wasn't there when I was home the last time. So, and all those crates that you see above the blue garage on the bottom left, that would have been, those are supplies that are just brought in by a barge ship that goes up there every summer. So the ship was just unloaded by seeing, you know, when you see anything like that around the communities. Okay. Another picture of Taloyoak and the hills and the community, and this would have been taken probably around end of June, this picture. Okay. And this is called, this area of my home community is called Disneyland because the government colored them so colorful when they built them. So this little area with all these colored houses is called Disneyland.
I like that.
Yeah. Another picture of the bay. Somebody really likes that picture of that garage. It's always in the picture.
Yeah.
So this is probably around early July, this picture. Okay. And this is a landmark. Wherever when you're out on the land, it's really, really easy to get lost. So you get to know these landmarks and you know where you are. You always know where you are. Little bit to the left, almost at the middle of the picture, there's that hill, and you can see something on top of that hill that's sticking up. That's another landmark. And when you see that, you know where you are. So these are landmarks that are really so important up there, and they have been there for years and years and years.
And you can see like you said the lichen on the rocks.
Yes, that's all lichen, all the rocks that have been there for years and years. There's lots of lichen. Thank you for pointing that out. So there's lots of lichen on exposed rocks. But when you pick up a rock and turn it over, you never see any lichen because they're in the land.
Yeah.
The lichen is created by rocks that are exposed to the air. Okay. And I'm not sure which community this is, but it would be another, you can see another Hudsons Bay company area, red and white housing. And I'm not sure which community this is at. We can go to the next one. And this is my home community. That's the RC church. The red and kind of brownish house. So this is part of the community. I have so many memories of this area. I used to go all day long as a child, going on, walking along the edges of the ocean, catching little sculpin fish and little codfish. and we would collect them in tin cans.
Mhm.
And our friends did a lot of walking around the edges of the lakes and the ocean shores, catching little fish. And by end of the day, we'd take them home, and our parents put them back in the water, saying, you know, like, this is going to be our food when they grow up, when they grow. So next one. And this is in my home community also. This is in the winter time. And we use skidoos in the winter before the climate change. They never used 4-tracks or 4-wheel Hondas. In the winter, it was too cold, but nowadays with the climate change and it's warmer, they now use 4-tracks all winter long. And you can see a lot of ravens there. They stay up there in the communities year round.
Hmm.
There we have no crows. We only have big ravens. So these are ravens. Next one.
Oh, I think that
Oh,
might
no
be it.
more.
Oh yeah, I think that was it. Yep. Back to the
Oh.
beginning here. Yeah.
Yeah. So did anybody have any questions that they want to ask about what I talked about or what I haven't talked about?
I don't know if we didn't have any questions on the live chat today, but
Okay.
We did have some comments that
yeah.
I got messages that people were watching from home and just loving the presentation and loving Martha.
Yeah. Yeah. We got some messages. They
But
really
I
love
think,
you.
yeah, it's the same thing. Like, I feel like you bring us to your home and bring us to your memories, bring us to like your culture growing up. And
Uh-huh.
even through the pictures, there's things I don't see like that you see that you point out, like
Uh-huh.
even the box kind of tea and the,
Yeah.
you're able to see the little things that are going on. And it just, for me, it's a really good way to get into the just the lifestyle, what was valuable,
Mhm.
what was important. And we just heard a lot about families, about relationships, about
Mhm.
relatives, about the land and the animals and how they're all connected.
Yes.
So
I think
miigwech.
throughout my life, valuing and treasuring all these memories makes me who I am today. I am very proud of who I am, how I was raised, where I come from.
Mhm.
But I know deep in my heart that what keeps me strong and I'm being proud of who I am, going back and knowing how how much hardship my grandparents, their parents, my parents went through to make sure we had a good life.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We never had a penny or money or anything, but we were always happy. We didn't know that part of life, that there was a world out there with money, that money runs.
Yeah.
Those are so important, the way we're taught. So
Yeah. Well,
Awesome.
I like the lessons and the lichen and the heather and the, even the puppies to play with. Like, to me,
yes,
it's like so rich in other ways,
yes,
so rich in very many other ways in relationships.
yes.
Miigwech.
Yeah, miigwech, Martha.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing with us today. It was, I know there was even more that we had talked about last week that you shared with us just one-on-one with our staff as we prepared for this week. And I think that you have so much more knowledge that you shared that you didn't get to share today. And I hope that in the future that we get to hear more
Yes.
from you in some way.
I never got around to it, but I wanted to show all my carvings
Oh,
Mhm.
yeah.
and the seal oil lamp, what kind of oil we use, what kind of wick we use.
Mhm.
and how important the land is to make them real, like the wick
Mm-hmm.
we get from the land,
Yeah.
and oil for the lamp, seal oil lamp we get from the seal fat,
Mhm.
things like that.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
yeah, thank you. And I also want to thank you for naming the people in the pictures too. I think that's really important.
Yes,
I know we have photographers. You talked about Richard Harrington was one that he went up north and took pictures of Inuit people.
yeah,
I think it's really important that as Indigenous people, we name those people in the pictures. They're not just named as Inuit person or Ojibwe person. You know, these
yeah,
people have lives and names and stories that are
yes,
important, and we should recognize that.
yeah.
And I love your stories about your dad and your grandmother and their interactions with the photographer too. So I think that's really important
And
to
those
recognize as well.
Richard Harrington pictures are so important because those pictures were taken before we had cameras.
Mm,
Mm-hmm.
So he came in as a photographer, and they're, I know for me, they're treasures. So
Yeah.